All right, so we are back in Spring Land with all of our lovely endpoints. We just have one right now. Um, so yeah, we left off. Uh, we got our Spring endpoint running, and I figured out how to get a very small curl output and not any of that lovely garbage we were getting before about the stats. Um, so Couple quick notes before we move on. This localhost is just means your local machine, and this port should match whatever port is output here in your Spring console when you actually run all this stuff. It's got even some nice art up here for you. Um, so yeah, as you can see, Spring does a lot of stuff to help you. We didn't have to set up any like HTTP servers or anything. We just said, okay, this is a Spring Boot application, let's go. And then we defined this controller. We didn't even have to like declare this controller anywhere. Spring just knows that it should be part of your application, and that's part of the dependency injection magic we talked about in the last video, where because this annotation is here, it just knows what this is and what it should be, um, and what this is and how all of the mappings work. So you don't have to do a lot of stuff, which is very nice and the main reason a lot of people use this. Um, so the next step with any REST API is okay. It's like usually you go in knowing what you want to do, but what do REST APIs do in general? And from what I've experienced, it's a middle ground between your customers, whoever's calling the API, and your data source. You don't want to have your customers calling your data source directly. It leads to a whole ton of mess, um, security and otherwise, but whole tons of messes. So usually these APIs are intermediaries between customers and data that they want to get at. And there's a lot of stuff you can do to make that data access easier here. We are going to set up an example data source. We are going to say, okay, we want to use the AWS SDK. I'm using AWS. I would recommend a cloud provider. Um, you know, creating your own databases is a little bit, outdated by now. You really don't want to host them; they're such a pain. So it's much better if you use something that's hosted on the cloud. So I'm using DynamoDB, which is like we'll get into it. But it's a database that we can use to essentially we can put data in, we can take data out, and the operations are very simple. Um, so in order to create that, we're going to add a package for DB, which will be our database package. And in here, we're going to create um, some things. So we're going to say AWS config, if only I could spell. And then we're going to let Spring know that this is a configuration class. So we're going to say configuration. So this essentially labels this, okay, this is a configuration class. And then in here, instead of using the provides stuff we were using in Juice, we're going to switch over to something else, which is going to be called a bean. This name is much more fun, in my personal opinion. But beans are these Java singletons that get thrown around between all of our different objects. So for our AWS module, we're going to do, let's see, we can still do it the provides naming because it's kind of nice. Provide creds. We're going to do AWS credentials provider. And then instead of doing the whole function body, we can just do default credentials provider dot create. This is going to be pretty simple. Now you can see IntelliJ gives some helpful hints to see where this bean is actually used. Fun. We're going to add a provider for the region. Region. And then we're going to do the default region provider chain. Alright, we'll skip doing that. We'll just set the region manually, because there's a lot of stuff there. And we're going to use US West 2. You'll get this region from the AWS console, or whatever you want to do there. So we're going to declare this as a bean as well, and now you see, okay, we have 2 beans in here. This is going to give us some config for our other classes. And we don't even need to wire this up because of this configuration tag. It's very nice about that. So now that we have our basic configuration set up, we're going to have our DynamoDB config. And this is kind of in place of the juice module stuff, if you can kind of tell, except there's like it's a lot more because the auto wiring or dependency injection, the names are kind of interchangeable, is much more thorough. So you'll see we'll mark this as configuration as well. And then let's create our DynamoDB client that we will use to actually get at some of this data. We'll do provides DB client. And then this time we're going to take in creds, AWS credentials provider, and we're going to take in the region. Make sure to get this same region and not something else. There are a bunch of things called region apparently, so if we do region, there's a JavaX one as well, but you're going to ignore that and make sure you get the one you want. So we're going to do DynamoDB client builder credentials provider region build. And we're going to specify return type explicitly. So this is going to provide a DynamoDB client from this configuration. And now we can see, whoa, we have a lot of stuff over here now. So if we click on this, it's going to take us back over to where this bean was declared. So the IDE, or IntelliJ at least, is very smart, and it knows, okay, you're asking for this, and you got it from this other module that declares this bean. Wow. So that's crazy. It's all set up. So now how do we get this DynamoDB client into our controller? Well, it's very easy. We literally just ask for it. So if we go DynamoDB client, and now we see, okay, navigate to where this was declared. It's right here. So all of this configuration is setting it up so that we have access to this when we want to do anything. Oh, this needs to be a val, little syntactical thing there. But yeah, so now we can do any request against DynamoDB that we would like. Cool. So now we have this all set up. I can go back to my AWS config, and I'm going to set it to a region that I don't use. Let's do EU West 1. So now we can do list tables. And then we can turn this into a string. You get the table names from there, and then we can do a join to string. We're going to make that and set the separator to be a comma. Actually, we'll just remove this and see if it can format it correctly. I hope it can. To string. Lots of Java objects have a nice toString method to just convert things super well. So we'll see if that actually works. So now we're going to launch our service again. And we see there are no errors here. So like all of the setup that this does automatically is kind of amazing. So we just have access to this DynamoDB client with all of our configs set up. And now we can do this curl again, and we see open close brace, which means we have no tables defined in this region. But that's fine, because we have our data set up, and now we can get access to this data source and provide data to users in an easy way. And yeah, we'll come back with more.